Welcome back to the Robaer Report. Today is March 21st, 2022. It's so great to see you all in the audience who are watching today, as well as those who will be watching or viewing this broadcast in the near future. Once again, my name is Robaer Washington, and I will be your host today for the Robaer Report. Here at the Robaer Report, our mission is to highlight individuals and or groups and their contribution to society and society's development. Now, that is important because today we have a sociologist on the stream today. Dr. Melvin Ray is not new to this channel. He was actually my first guest, I believe January 3rd, but on my end, I had some technical difficulties. We talked, and he said he's welcome to come back because he appreciated the format. Dr. Ray, how you doing today, man?
Wonderfully well, sir. Let me first say thank you for having me back on the
Yes, sir.
Robaer Report.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Dr. Ray, and what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take the title, take the cover of your book, and I'm going to put it onto the stream. I'm doing this because Dr. Ray's book, An Introduction to America's Rigged Democratic System and Systemic Racism, African Americans' Extraordinary Perseverance and Phenomenal Resiliency. Here I have my copy, but I wanted to put it up on the background so that everyone can know that you can go and get your copy as well. I put the link for the text in the chat, as well as I'll scroll down real quickly, just so you'll know. It's $20 on store.bookbaby.com. It's a 400-page book, and which is a riveting 400-page book. On this site, it has an overview, description, and about the author. Dr. Ray, um, once again, welcome.
Thank
And
you.
I'm Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I've known Dr. Ray for about 6 years now. We met. He was one of the first sociologists that I met in Mississippi. I've known a few throughout the in my other schools, but he invited me into his office at a university and just talked to me as a person, and I got a chance to know him as a person. And I mean, I know he's an elder gentleman, but I would say that he's been a great friend and a great person I can call on whenever I just had questions about whatever, in particular academic things. So he told me about this book, and I wanted to bring him on today to highlight it once again. So Dr. Ray, Dr. Melvin Ray, he's a serial entrepreneur, philanthropist, thought leader, and author. Dr. Ray, tell us where you're from. I know you're in Starkville, Mississippi right now, but where are you from? Tell us about that.
Well, I'm from the Arkansas Delta. I'm from a little small town. People may have heard of it over the weekend, Dumas, Arkansas. Uh, but it is a rural, small town of 4,000. My parents were sharecroppers. We grew up as sharecroppers in the Arkansas Delta. Um, we did everything that you do on a farm. We chopped cotton, we hooked beans, uh, we picked cotton. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so we did all those things growing up in rural Arkansas.
Great. Wow. So, and also you mentioned something very important about Dumas, Arkansas. I know we're on the show, but just in your own time, for those who are watching now in the future, give Dumas, Arkansas a moment of silence. There was an incident where it appears that one person lost their life. There were various people who were injured, and looks like some of those people were children. I mean, I just saw information on the AP,
Mhm.
Associated Press, so I'm not there, just relaying some information because Dr. Ray is from that town. So, in your own time, give a moment of silence, look it up. If there's any way you can contribute, if the town is looking forward to it, looking for a contribution, do so. Um, and so on your, I'm looking just some of your career highlights. So you started as a chopping cotton. You ended up as associate vice president for economic development at a, well, pretty much you might want to say a global university. Tell us
Mhm.
about that. How did you like what? How explain what was in between that from chopping cotton to vice president of a university?
Good question, Mr. Washington. But growing up in Arkansas Delta and chopping cotton on the side of Highway 65, we would see the cars coming by during the heat of the summer, and they had their windows up, and we used to always look at those cars and think, "Wow, it is about 100 degrees out here," and they're driving down the road with the windows up. Yeah, of course they had air conditioning.
That's right.
So standing out there in that hot field looking at those cars, I used to dream about one day having a car in which I could drive around during the heat of the summer with my windows up. That was my inspiration. And in school, my teachers saw something in me.
Mm-hmm.
They encouraged me to do well, and I did well. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so I graduated from high school and was ready to go to work,
Mm-hmm.
but then got a partial scholarship to the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, formerly
Okay.
AM&N,
Okay.
Pine Bluff, and went there. Was doing well, got a chance to know some of the professors, and when I got ready to graduate, the placement officer, I used to play tennis with him, and he said, "Melvin, what are you going to do?" I was working as a prison guard
Mm.
from 11 to 7 on death row. I did that for about 2 years while going to
Okay.
school during the day, and I worked from 11 to 7 at the prison. So
Mm.
I thought I had it going on. I had a little old 72 Toyota Corona. I was living in an apartment, and I was in Arkansas, man. I
Okay.
thought I was balling. But the placement officer told me, said, "Melvin, uh, you can go to grad school and they'll pay you just as much as you're making at that prison working 40 hours a week.
Wow.
They'll pay you to get to earn a degree." And he said,
Wow.
I know a guy at Iowa State University. If you want me to, I'll call him." And I said, "Sure." Well, he called him. I went to Iowa State University. They put me on a research assistantship. And so that started my career. I started writing, doing research for a Japanese lady, professor by the name of Motoko Lee. And
Okay.
she and I started publishing articles. And I just got excited about doing research, empirical research, searching for the truth and being
Okay.
able to cite other sources when I did it. Well, the next
Okay.
thing came around, I worked with another professor, and I was the lead author on an empirical research article in a referee journal, which was sort of unheard of at Iowa State University for a master level student to do that.
Okay.
Um, so that kicked off my career. They allowed me to teach my own course, a small
Wow.
a social psychology course, small group dynamics. Um, and then once I graduated, a person from Cornell College came and offered me a visiting assistant professorship at Cornell College, a very highly prestigious private school,
Mm-hmm.
and did that. And then Mississippi State came and recruited me to
Mm.
be an academic coordinator over the Corrections Criminal Justice Program. I did that for a couple of years, and then I became a research coordinator in the Social Science Research Center. Uh, After that, I was selected to become the associate vice president for research as a
Okay.
sociologist at an engineering school. So
Okay. That's right.
that was an interesting job because I had to coordinate activities uh, filled by primarily engineers, and engineers look down on sociologists. So,
Correct.
so it was a challenge, but I love that job because it allowed me to gain confidence in the sense that you don't have to be an engineer to be a manager
Right.
or an administrator. So after that, and unfortunately, the vice president for research passed away on the Thanksgiving, and the
Mm.
president of the university called me up while I was at home in Dumas and asked me to serve as the interim vice president for research
Okay.
at Mississippi State University. And that university had about $100 million research program.
Right.
So I became the manager of that research program there. And I did that for 2 years. Another president came in and offered me, he moved me from the vice president for research position, but then I became special assistant to the president. I did that for 3 consecutive chancellors.
Wow.
After that, a new president came in, and the university had become involved in economic development. That is, in the early 2000s, the state of Mississippi decided that it would use its research universities to help work with the state to retain, recruit, and create new high-wage jobs for the state. So the universities became tied very closely with the economic development agency in the state. And it was my job to manage that interface. Whenever the state needed some expertise to help recruit a major economic impact project, it was my job to search around the university and find the right people. Now that was the same time, and I was involved, but I did not lead the Nissan when Mississippi recruited Nissan.
Wow.
I was in the president's office during that time, and I helped assemble partners to work on that proposal to recruit Nissan.
Oh, okay.
I was not the lead, but I was there. Where I became actively involved in economic development is when we went after the airplane, the helicopter manufacturing plant. That's when I became heavily involved in economic development. So some of the projects that I helped to coordinate the university's engagement in, we recruited a helicopter manufacturer, 3 drone manufacturers. They produced drones for the Department of Defense. Packard, the diesel engine manufacturer there, and a host of small businesses. One of my jobs was to write a proposal to the Economic Development Administration to create a business incubator. So that proposal funded the first business incubator in our research park.
Wow. Okay.
The next project, I worked with the mayor of Starkville. It was a joint project between the university and the city, where we piloted a public transit system.
Right. Smart.
So yeah, the smart bus. We wrote the initial proposal to pilot the smart bus that commutes all around Starkville, carrying the public. I was the project director for the university on that particular project. So work with a lot of small businesses in terms of the incubator, travel with the state to other states trying to recruit new businesses. So I got a good feeling and behind the scenes view of what it takes to recruit high wage jobs to a rural state.
Right. That's right. And so, all right. So I'm gonna mention 2 things about other positions you've had. Then I'm gonna go back to what you just spoke to this audience about. Some of the projects that you've worked on in your career. All right. So it also says you were the co-founder and CFO of the Local Learning Community Foundation, a 501c3, and that's based in Starkville. And you're the founder and CEO of Empathic Solutions Group. We'll pull up Empathic Solutions Group. We'll pull that Facebook group page up in a second. But I want to say something. So Dr. Ray just spoke to this audience about what tasks he was in charge of in managing or brokering business to come to Mississippi on behalf of the university. That was his job, if I'm saying this correctly. On a micro level, he was, in my opinion, responsible for creating 5,000, 6,000, 10,000 jobs, maybe. Was responsible for feeding men, women, children in a town of, I believe, 25, 30,000 people.
Yes.
Dr. Melvin Ray was one of the people. There were others involved also, but they're not on this show today. Maybe one day I'll bring them on the show if they are open to it. But we're talking to a person who took time out of his life to find solutions to keep people in their homes with food in their stomach and keeping children in schools. That's the type of person that we're talking to today. We're not talking to a person who, on the outset, was so engrossed in trying to make a more than $1 for himself. He was interested in separating that dollar and feeding and taking care of other people in his community. All right. And I'm from Starkville. I'll be honest with you. Dr. Ray was doing a lot of work. The man, you would not know because he's so humble. He doesn't walk around, ride around in this Jaguar saying, "Hey, I'm putting all this stuff together. You all should be happy for me." All right. He does these work out of the kindness of his heart. I remember I saw a pamphlet, and this was when I was a child. This pamphlet was created, but I was an adult when I found it. It was, I believe, it was through M&F Bank. I think it was M&F Bank. He had created a program for some teachers or some women or something, and I was like, I know this guy from somewhere. So even when I was a child, he was working to make my life better, along with some of my counterparts who I was in school with, and making a way for my mother and father and other family members to make a living in Starkville. So I just wanted to say that to him, and to also to everybody who's listening, because we have more. This is not what our show is about today. I wanted him to talk about his background because of this exciting book that he's written. All right. So I'm gonna pull up the Empathic Solutions Group. I'm gonna put that in the background. Um, you all can go to his website. I mean, well, YouTube page. I mean, Facebook page. Sorry, Facebook Empathic Solutions Group. Definitely check it out. Contact information is on the page for those who are interested, as well as shop for the book that we're going to discuss today. All right, we'll put that up in the on the background in a few moments again. Um, so, an introduction to America's rigged democratic system and systemic racism. Subtitle: African Americans: Extraordinary Perseverance and Phenomenal Resiliency. All right, Dr. Ray. I'm gonna just start out. So, the theory behind your book. I know when I read it, I saw that you spoke of former President Donald Trump. Uh, the Newt Gingrich his name came up. LBJ name came up, and Moynihan, Dr. Patrick Moynihan. If you can't speak to that with regard to the development of the theory to build your book.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. That's a good question. The impetus behind the book was my life and my experiences, and listening to well-known leaders uh, in both the Republican and Democratic parties. I was always amazed at the statements that some of those people would make. Um, Lyndon President Johnson, for instance, talked about the black family. He and uh, Monahan, they talked about the black family and what a grave injustice had occurred to black people in the U.S. Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House, he did an interview back in 2016, in which he said that he didn't know the extent to which black folks had been discriminated against, and still until he started talking to some of his black friends, and that gave him a realization of the barriers and challenges that black folks have had to overcome here in the U.S. But what really got me working, uh, beginning of that 4-year journey, is when Donald Trump, well, the presidential nominee in 2016, when Donald Trump stood there and was trying to recruit black voters,
Mm-hmm.
and what he said was, your schools are no good, you're unemployed, you know, what do you have to lose? I mean, you can go back and watch those interviews. That's what he said. And as I began to think, when white politicians and other Caucasian Europeans when they think about African Americans, or as a friend of mine would say, Americans of African descent, okay, they only think or can imagine what they think they see and what they think they know. So when I heard Donald Trump tell us that we had nothing to lose, that the system was rigged, and that again, I coined that term from him. He said the system was rigged. So I said, you know what? The system is rigged. But when we start talking to one another, generally speaking, that's all we say. The system is rigged.
Right.
Well, my question was, how is it rigged? And how has it been rigged? And how has that rigging impacted African Americans as a group throughout history? So I started looking at each system we got in this country from the formation of the country till 2020. And I empirically researched the establishments of laws, bills, public policies in each one of those systems. And when I say system, I'm talking about those institutions that have been created to fulfill a compelling public need. So we look at the political system, the economic system, educational system, and your communication systems, health systems. But if you go back and trace the history of all of those systems and look at how they impacted African Americans, but not only that, most people only look at one system at a time. They'll tell us about the criminal justice system, and we'll talk about police surveillance, arrests, and so forth and so on. But they don't talk about how the economic system is tied to the outcomes in the criminal justice system, or the education, or how the educational system is tied to both the criminal justice system and the economic system, plus the political system.
Wow.
All those interconnections. So when you look at the combined effects of all of those systems on the backs of African Americans, that's where the subtitle comes in.
Okay.
African Americans' extraordinary perseverance and phenomenal resiliency.
Okay.
Because what I try to do is to say in the book, look at all the challenges that we have had to overcome in each one of these systems, but look at the progress we made.
Right.
So that's a whole different conversation, particularly when we find ourselves talking with some of our other brethren of different races and ethnicities. We can always say that we have a unique history in the U.S. Yeah, well, that's easy. That's easy to say. But in the book, I try to give us the ammunition, the facts that we can talk about and give them for any system that they identify. We can say, wait a minute. We can say, wait a minute. Let's look at the history of that system and how it impacted African Americans. Case in point, if you talk about wealth accumulation in the U.S. traditionally has been based on land ownership. Okay, so let's start with land ownership in the U.S. as it relates to Black folks or Americans of African descent.
Okay.
From the beginning, land was given away to Europeans. Hundreds and thousands, millions of acres have been given to Europeans. Black folks could not own land. Now, so when those land giveaways came about, the head right system from the very beginning, then you got all those other land treaties that I talk about in the book that gave away all this land, plus the minerals, plus the minerals underneath, and everything on top.
That's right.
Now that land has been transferred from one generation to another. Some have lost them, but the vast majority of that land is still in the same hands of those racial and ethnic groups that had it from the beginning, during the time when Black folks could not own it legally.
Hey, Dr. Ray, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna put a pin in it. I'm gonna say something. I want you to continue.
Okay.
So the conversation that you just had about the land ownership, there's a book that I found when I was living in Mississippi after I graduated Howard University. And it was about, I think it's called a brief history of Oktibbeha County.
Okay.
And in that book, it spoke of the development of Oktibbeha County. And what you just said was a major part of it. Land was stripped away from those people who were on that land, the indigenous people, and it was given for pennies to specific landowners. Some of those landowners' names are on street signs in my hometown.
Correct.
So I bring up the names. I bring up Starkville because, and on a very micro level, what you're talking about is on a very macro level. This is not just about a small town, Starkville, Mississippi. This was systemic throughout the United States of America. All right. So I wanted to highlight that because we talked about you and your work in Mississippi. And those who are viewing this program may just look at it and say, oh, or they can say, oh, he's just talking about Mississippi. And Mississippi and the South are already getting a bad rap. Forever. It's always gotten a bad rap. We're not talking about that in this show. We're talking about on a macro level. Remember, you all, we're talking to a highly developed sociologist. Continue, Dr. Ray.
Well, I mean, you said it. I mean, this was something that the federal government orchestrated across this great United States. So in every state, the land was given away, but it wasn't given to Black folks.
Right.
All right. So you have to start looking at that. So when people start talking, saying that, maybe Black folks don't invest in property, and younger people would look around and say, well, Black people don't own land. When they start reading the history and looking around.
Yeah.
We have to be able to articulate facts about why is it that we own a relatively less land than other racial and ethnic groups.
Right.
And what the book tries to do is give us that ammunition when we talk about wealth accumulation.
That's right.
Even when we talk about the employment laws and public policies related to employment. If you go back and research minimum wage tables, you will find that there was no minimum wage for agricultural workers.
Right. Serious?
Go back and do the research. Go back and do the research from as far back as you can and look at minimum wage tables. And you will find over there in the column where it says agriculture farm workers is blank. Now, where in the earlier days, where were most Blacks concentrated?
Agricultural farm work. Right.
There you go.
That's right.
So again, you have to be able to tie all these things together.
Right.
To get a fuller picture of all the obstacles we've had to overcome to get to where we are today.
Wow. Okay. All right. So you just said a lot, and it's a lot to digest for a person who has not had a real interest in the topic that you're discussing. Most of us, we're just going about our daily life, going along to get by. All right. But there are specific areas, in particular with Black folks, that we have a lot of interaction with. And these are topics that you discuss in your book. So when we talk, you ran off about 10 or 11 different topics. I just want to discuss 4 of them today. One of them is criminal justice. Explain what the criminal justice system means with regard to the theoretical framework in your text and in regards to the title.
Well, if we look at the history of the criminal justice system in the United States, the criminal justice system was basically created to intimidate, deter, and punish the poor, and particularly Black folks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You got to remember, even in the Bible, it says that you have no criminals until you create laws.
Right.
Okay, the only way you can have a criminal, you have to have a law for them to violate.
Mm.
So when we look at the criminal justice system, we ask ourselves, what laws have been created that have adversely impacted African Americans? Well, in the early days of slavery and so forth, all of them,
Mm-hmm.
runaway slaves, you name it, talking back, uh,
Mm-hmm.
loitering, uh,
Mm-hmm.
just every law uh, was created in order to um, cause us to do what they wanted us to do. Well, you fast forward, and I track this in the book, but
Mm-hmm.
you fast forward. Congress create laws, so you got the Congress who's sitting there either in Washington D.C. or in our state legislatures.
Correct.
Well, who are these people who traditionally have been sitting around the table to create the laws? There were no black folks virtually.
That's right.
Okay, so these laws have been created, and I'll just fast forward so I don't take up a whole lot of time. But
No,
uh,
no, no, take your time to explain what you want to explain, because these are very deep concepts that need to be unpacked. And this is not the only time I'll have you on the show to unpack these topics. So speak as freely as you choose. We have time.
okay, well, again, my background again, as I told you, I was a prison guard, and I worked on death row for about 2 years. But when you look at this criminal justice system, you'll find everything that starts with law enforcement. So
Mm-hmm.
Congress creates the laws. So you got these in the early days, only men sitting around the table who created these laws. Now the next phase is enforcement. Well, who's
Mm-hmm.
going to enforce these laws?
Mm.
All right. So now you got to look at the recruitment of law enforcement, LEOs. Okay, law enforcement officers, LEOs. Okay, and you start looking at the recruitment of law enforcement officers. You began with the slave patrols. I mean, they were our law enforcement officers, slave patrol, keeping black folks in order. All right.
So all right. In the Mississippi Highway Patrol driver's license manual. Most people don't know this, because when people go to get their driver license, they go to get their driver license.
Yeah.
They generally don't read the manual. Well, I made the mistake of reading the manual. And what you just said was how the Mississippi Highway Patrol began to go and catch runaway slaves.
Correct.
Continue, sir. I just wanted to highlight that. Continue.
Right. Well, that was the beginning of law enforcement, LEOs. Uh, so you start looking at that, and you look at the recruitment. For a long time, law enforcement and firefighters, they were almost like a mafia. They were family run or ethnic run. You had to be a member of a certain family or ethnic group to be a member
That's correct.
of law enforcement. So, and then they came up with these tests you had to take in order
Correct.
to become a law enforcement officer. Uh,
Correct.
they also increased the academic credentials you needed. Now, I will agree that law enforcement officers, men and women, need to be literate. They need to be
Yes.
able to read, do some math, some thinking, but you don't need a college degree
Right.
to be a good law enforcement officer. Uh, and then they start looking at different experiences. Well, black folks are always the last hired and the first fired.
Correct.
So when you start looking at setting up criteria to hire people, it's rigged. I mean, I've helped write job descriptions and the recruitment minimum qualifications, and you can write out a huge segment of your population just in the criteria you set for
Wow.
that position. For instance, one of the things I'll just be obvious about it, because it links to the criminal justice system. We know that if you got a criminal history record, it's highly unlikely that you're going to be the ranked number one in a job pool. All right, but we are disproportionately we disproportionately have criminal history records. All right, so but then if we transfer from back to law enforcement, as I was going, then you have the law enforcement. Well, the next stage, as the book talks about, then you have to look at patrol patterns. Well, where do law enforcement patrol? Where they patrol gives you a good indication of who they're going to arrest.
Correct.
Because if you look for crime, you'll find crime. Yep. So when you start looking at their surveillance patterns, where they patrol, when they patrol, you'll see what's going on. And then you start looking at, well, what crimes are they apprehending or arresting folks for? And you will find that in highly segregated communities, you'll find a lot of traffic violations.
Right.
One of the cases in point was Ferguson, Missouri, where almost half of their city budget was based on traffic citations. And who was getting those traffic citations?
Wow.
Black folks.
Black folks.
But it's not restricted to Ferguson, Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're patrolling in our neighborhoods, you're gonna see us if now we shouldn't be rolling a stop sign.
We should California road.
Yeah, we should keep our tail lights, going and so forth. So I agree with that. But I believe if you're surveilling all communities at the same rate, you'll find some other traffic violations in other places as well. But then it goes down to, well, if you get arrested for a crime, can you make bail? And if you can't make bail, where are you going to stay? In jail. Well, if you got a job, what happens to that job? Now, there are going to be those folks who are going to say, well, if you commit the crime, you ought to do the time. I agree. But in many of these cases, the person would be out and eventually they would be found innocent. But it's too late. It's too late. They've lost a job. They lost their credibility. They now have a label on them. So and then you go to the prosecuting attorneys. They make all of their status, their career aspirations are based on their convictions. So they have an incentive to find as many people guilty as possible.
Right.
And some of them do whatever they can think of to make sure they have a high guilty rate.
That's correct.
So you just keep going, and then you go, I'm going to skip forward, but because I go through this in the book so that when people are talking to other folks who come up with some misperceptions about Black folks in the criminal justice system, they can start talking about these different stages within the system in which it's stacked against Black folks. Now, Black folks do commit crimes. Let me be perfectly clear. All races commit crimes.
That's right.
If you look at marijuana, for years, they've done research on marijuana use, and they found that Black folks and white folks use marijuana at the same level.
Wow.
But in terms of arrest, we're probably 50 times more likely,
right,
to be arrested and prosecuted for marijuana. Well, and most people know about the crack versus powder cocaine. The same thing. So you got to look at who's making these laws, what laws are passed, and the enforcement and prosecution of the laws.
Right.
Then I'm gonna skip forward to the prison system because I worked in the prison system, but here's something I found very interesting. Two things about the prison system. One, it's a money-making enterprise.
Right.
I mean, think about it. Think about it. You have individuals and corporations who are getting rich, who are millionaires, billionaires, by imprisoning other Americans. Disproportionately, Black folks.
I'm gonna put a pin in this one again because my mother's birthday was Saturday. Happy birthday to my mom. I think she turned
happy birthday.
63. So this is what she said. My uncle, well, I say my uncle. I got a lot of uncles. I'm not talking about anyone in particular. But he was incarcerated when she was in her teens.
Okay.
And she said that when they would go to Mississippi Department of Corrections, Parchman, Mississippi, she saw them making these leather purses.
Yes.
And so I'm listening to her. She said, I would like one of those leather purses for my birthday. I said, okay,
Nice.
Mama, I hear you. And so I said, Mama, you know what's in? She said, yeah, they were doing a lot of work down there. I said, Mama, you know what's interesting? All that land, they had all the cattle they wanted. And they had all the workforce. She was like, Robaer, you absolutely correct. I was like, just think about it. You got cattle, you have land, and you got labor that is very cheap.
Yes.
And you can create all the leather products that you want. Continue. I'm just adding some
antidotes to it. Yeah,
yeah.
Right. Well, but look at this prison system, like you said. But 30, 40 years ago, communities would rise up in arms if you said you were going to build a prison or a jail in their community.
Correct.
Today they'll fight over them.
Fight over them.
Yes. Because it's an economic engine. It brings jobs. Okay. It brings people. I mean, some people, they live so far away, when they come visit, they may spend the night. They may buy gas.
That's right.
Buy some chips and Coke.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's an economic, and you got to feed them. But here's the thing that really caught my eye that's in the book. And I shouldn't give all this away, but I will. When you start looking at prison facilities, and let's say you got 2,000 inmates in this particular prison.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when they do the census, where do you think those inmates are counted as part of the population?
Oh, wow.
Now, but that's not it. That's not it. See, the key is then you start looking at congressional districts. So what you find is that you can get a congressional district based on the number of inmates you got in your prison, because they add to your population.
Wow. Okay.
But they don't vote.
Oh my. Oh my. Oh wow. You know, wow. You know what? I'm hearing you talk about the criminal justice system. So I had a disagreement with you on two areas. Mm-hmm. One is the military, the other one is the system of communications. Mm-hmm. And I say that because while all the 11 or so odd areas, I do see them having an impact on African Americans or Americans of African descent or Black folks. I saw them having a direct impact. The military and communication system, I didn't see that in the very beginning, because the military, there are a lot of Black people who have succeeded in the military. One of the highest is former general, God rest his soul now, Colin Powell. All right. That's in the military. So then you have the system of communications. You have two people who are actually from Mississippi who moved to Illinois, different time periods. Bob Johnson or Robert Johnson, BT, and Oprah Winfrey, both from Mississippi. They both went to Chicago, and from there they branched off to make their money. All right. Black people have been making strides, particularly in the military and communications, but there are problems. Could you speak to those, one or both of those areas, and how they relate to the theory in your book?
Well, in the book, what I do is I trace the history of the military and the involvement of African Americans in the military, and we've been there from the very beginning. Black folks have fought into the different wars, but in all those cases, there was severe rigging and systemic racism in the military institution. Mm-hmm. from the very beginning. Even after the Emancipation Proclamation, and when Lincoln did most of that in order to get black folks to fight in the war.
Right.
But when we were enlisted in the war, what did they do? They didn't make us officers.
Mm.
They gave us the worst assignments. We did a lot of digging of graves. Now we did some fighting too, but my point is those highly acclaimed and rewarded positions, we were restricted. We were not allowed to hold those.
Okay.
So what I do is I try to walk forward and say, well, what's going on now? There was a manpower study done for the military, I think back in 2009. And in that study, it lists uh, the demographics of each branch of the military.
Mm.
Yeah. So when I started researching that, I found that blacks are overrepresented in just about every branch of the military in terms of the enlisted personnel.
Okay.
In terms of the enlisted personnel. So black folks are about 13% of the population. We were ranging around 14, 16% in some of those different military. But when we start looking at the officers, the people who are in charge, who manage, then black folks were woefully underrepresented.
Wow.
We didn't come anywhere close to being 13% of the officers.
Okay.
Now, what's wrong with that picture? If the military has been so good to us.
Right. Okay.
And I'll give you a case in point. The Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
I got a brother who fought in the Vietnam War. And I've heard other people talk about where they were positioned on the battlefield. You know, most of the time, you want to put black folks in the back, right?
Right.
Back seat on the bus, back on the train.
Right.
All right.
Classroom. Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. But now, if you do the research and you find out in the Vietnam War, where did they put a lot of us? Out front.
Wow.
The rifle detail, the fire detail.
Wow.
So President Kennedy had a study done, and this is in the book. You can find it. It's not what Melvin Ray is saying. This is what the records show. Some people got so concerned about the outrageous percent of black folks who were getting killed.
Wow.
And they did a study. And that's what they found. A lot of it was, hey, we were disproportionately put out front for the first time. We were put out front. We led.
Wow.
All right. Now, I'm going to fast forward because then you start looking at, well, what happened when they came home? 1919. 1919. You had the red hot summer. I mean, they were lynching black folks in uniforms. But now, the real thing I want to talk about, because we always talk about wealth accumulation in the black community.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the major forms of wealth creation in the U.S. has been the GI Bill for all veterans. But now, do some research on the GI Bill and the similarities and differences between what black veterans got versus their counterparts. And
Wow.
you will find that black folks, black veterans who fought for this country, gave their lives, injuries, when they came home, not the ones who died, of course, but the ones who came home, they had a lot of challenges just to get tuition to go to college. And of course, during the early days, they were restricted to either 2-year technical schools or HBCUs, and great HBCUs now. No disparaging about HBCUs, but I'm just saying they went and fought for America, all of America.
Right.
But when they came home, the GI Bill said, if you want to go to a technical, you got to go to a technical school, or if you want to go to college, you got to go to a HBCU, and we have to approve whether or not we're going to pay your tuition. That's one part.
Right.
And the records will show there was severe discrimination. But the point I would like to make, the bedrock of wealth creation in America is home ownership.
Correct.
For most folks, most families, that's going to be their major investment, their home. So one of the great components of the GI Bill was those guaranteed loans for veterans to buy their homes. If you do the research,
Wow.
you'll find that a lot of Black veterans were denied that aspect of the GI Bill.
Wow.
So think about it. A larger percent of Black folks could have had homes
Correct.
if their GI Bill would have been approved.
It was
They could have handed
Wow.
that wealth down from one generation to the next, but they were denied.
Wow.
So, and then I go to one other component of the military. If you want to be on a fast track to becoming a leader in the military, you go to a military academy. Well, in order for you to get into a military academy, you have to get a letter of recommendation from one of your congressional representatives. Now think about this over time in this country, and who most likely your congressional representative would have been. Correct. And would he or she approve writing a letter of recommendation for a Black person in the U.S.?
Wow.
Now it's changing because we're getting a larger number of Blacks and other people in Congress who are willing to give Black folks a chance. But my point is, if you want a fast track in the military, in the Department of Defense, the military academy is where you want to be.
That's right.
But we face systemic racism in the recruitment and awarding of those very high valued scholarships.
Right.
And then you think about it, and those are the people who are fast tracked. They become decision makers in the military. They become consultants. You see them on talk shows. They become, colonels, generals, and you rightly identified General Austin, General Powell. I guess I would quiz you and say, well, how many other generals do you know? African American. We often can identify the few because they are few.
That's few.
Right? So for the military, and I agree with you, I've always heard, and I respect veterans. I got classmates, man, who graduated from high school, went to the military, retired after 20 years. Man, I'm envious of them.
That's right.
Retired after 20 years. They got their full benefits. They've been able to, buy homes, and they're young. I mean, we're talking about somebody who's around 40 years, 41.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
So, I mean, I agree with you. But I also say that the system was rigged.
Right.
And there was systemic racism, or there is. I believe there still exists in the military, and you just have to read the history and track it. And that's what I do in the book. I just show you different policies that were implemented in the military that impacted Black folks. Now,
that's right.
But the same thing is true for, you said, communication, mass media. Yeah, I mean, you're correct. I mean, Mr. Johnson and Oprah. Oh man, brilliant, no question about it. But again, you can identify them. I mean, on your hand, you can count them. My question would be, if you took away all the challenges and barriers that Black folks have had to fight against and overcome, would there be other Oprahs? Other Bob Johnsons?
That's right. That's right.
And I say yes. Right. I say yes. I say a lot more. And that goes back to the subtitle. Okay. Extraordinary perseverance and phenomenal resiliency. I think Black folks ought to be applauded and rewarded.
That's right.
We ought to be the model for perseverance and resiliency in the U.S.
That's right. That's right.
And you can do that by tracking what we've had to overcome to succeed in these different systems that operate in this country.
Correct. Wow. You know what, Dr. Ray? Man, you lay down some laws today, man. You lay down some rules that need to be studied by academicians and just a regular Joe on the street right now, man. People need to take heed to what you're saying. Go and get your copy of An Introduction to America's Rigged Democratic System and Systemic Racism, African Americans' Extraordinary Perseverance and Phenomenal Resiliency by Dr. Melvin C. Ray. You know, we're coming up on the hour, and you have some major challenges with this book. And I noticed that top names would not allow ads to be sold on their platforms because of the title of this book, i.e., Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, maybe others. Would you like to speak to that before we, close out as we come up on this hour?
Great question, Mr. Washington. Being a poor old country boy from the Arkansas Delta, I was shocked and amazed when we started submitting proposal for ads on the different social media platforms, and we were rejected time and time again. And I got a message from one that said your topic is very sensitive at this time. This is done the same time. This book came out in 2020. Okay,
right.
It was the same time some of the platforms were censoring then President Trump.
Correct.
Okay.
Wow.
But the title of the book, I thought, given the rhetoric that he was spewing at the time, would say, okay, he's been saying it's a rigged system, and this book will show you how it's been rigged. And it will substantiate the claim of systemic racism.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it was a great source for someone to have in their library, that if they wanted to discuss a certain topic, because I envisioned this book as being a discussion piece. I really did. I thought it would be a book that mixed groups of people or just groups of folks could get together and educate themselves on the history of the different systems here in the U.S. and how they have impacted Black folks or Americans of African descent. So that when we're talking to different races of people or ethnicities who don't understand the struggle and the challenges that we've gone through, we have the real facts, and we can point them to data, right, official data, to show them what we've had to overcome, and that the progress we have made is even more extraordinary than they could ever think of.
Correct.
Given the unique challenges that we've had to overcome. And so what I wanted to do is provide a sole source reference book.
Correct.
For all America, all the world. I mean, this book is sold around the world. Okay. But yeah, I was shocked that, and it's still censored. I talked to one of the platforms about 4 months ago, and they told me, well, no, not yet. And so I'm amazed that here I am, an entrepreneur, willing and able to buy an ad, and they won't take my money to buy an ad for my book. But I'm trying to help America realize its potential by decreasing hate, by allowing people to understand that Black folks are not sitting out here begging for help. We're saying, take away the rigged system and the systemic racism, and we'll compete.
That's right.
And if you tell me there that we ought to get over it, forget about it, we all equal, then I say, go back and trace the history.
That's right.
Look at what we've had to overcome, and then tell me that it's a level playing field.
It's a level playing field. Man,
I
Dr. Ray,
mean,
man, wow, level playing field. Go ahead, man.
whew. Well, I mean, my point is, I can't see how anyone can truthfully and sincerely argue that there is a level playing field or there has been a level playing field. And most people who you talk to who have a different opinion will talk about, well, you Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. Lyndon B. Johnson created the civil rights and voting rights act.
Right?
You guys should be doing, as well as anybody else.
You forgot one, Dr. Ray. You forgot that we had our first black president.
Oh yeah, but yeah, and that's the other thing that they will tell you that there's no way America democratic system could be rigged or there's systemic racism because we elected President Obama.
Right?
So now, we can't say anything about what's going on in America
Mm-hmm.
and not be accused of playing the race card.
Correct.
And that's why I say use facts.
Use facts.
Use their own facts to validate what we're saying.
That's correct.
Because I know for a fact that we must understand too that there are good people
Mm-hmm.
of all races and ethnicities. They're good people. And it has taken all of us together to achieve the progress that we've made.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were not the majority in either party.
Correct.
So we could not pass laws on our own.
Right.
And I think we have to take that into consideration when we're dealing with other people. That, yes, there is systemic racism, but in the book, I created a typology of different people that you have to look at. Robert K. Merton said that there were people, he called them fair weather liberals.
Mm. Mm.
Wow. He called them fair weather liberals, man. And then there was some all weather liberals. Then there was some fair weather bigots and some all weather bigots.
Wow. Okay.
but I had to talk about the people who are mostly fair, sometimes fair, mostly unfair.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to come up with typologies of people, and you can't lump everybody in the same basket.
That's right.
But when it comes to Black folks and our progress, I just believe in order for us to get a full understanding and appreciation of our perseverance and our resiliency, we have to look at the total picture. And that is by each system. Look at each system independently and then look at them combined and look at how they have impacted African Americans. But more importantly, look at how African Americans have overcome those challenges and those barriers. And that's what the book is designed to do.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And I love your title. It's wordy. It is so wordy. Yet you didn't string together some terms that sounded good. I'm sure it took you a little while to come up with that title and the subtitle because it actually has a great ring to it when you sit down and think about what's actually being said. Because your book goes into unpacking word by word what your title means. And that's what I appreciate about it. Because when I saw it, I was like, what can this book be about? I mean, I know you. I've come to know of you. I'll say I've come to know of you, and I know you're a very wise man. Some will say smart. I say a very wise man. I mean, when we opened up this show, what you did was an act of wisdom. You created you were part of a system that fed people, helped them pay their mortgage, helped them pay their rent, car note, making tires at a tire facility, making cars in one part of the state We also got another factory that builds cars in another part of the state. You're making diesel engines. You contributed your efforts to helping people that I know personally help make diesel engines at Packard. So, um, I know that you put in a lot of time and thought into this work that you created, just as you have done in the work that you've done to pretty much take care of the town of Starkville. I would even consider you somebody like a town father. I don't know if you would accept that. I don't know if other people would accept it, but you took your efforts, your resources, your skills, and you made sure that they were useful for the community. And you're a valuable asset in that town. You're a valuable asset across the United States. Um, but that's just my opinion. Others may have different opinions, but they're not here on the Robaer report today. All right. So I
Thank
want
you.
to say I want to say thank you, Dr. Ray. We've gone a little bit over the hour. I didn't want to keep you so long, but I didn't want to stop you because I wouldn't feel good about myself. And I know we have a lot more to unpack from the title, from the chapter titles, from the subtitle of the book, and from just your work experience and just your experiences in life. So in the decades you've been on this planet, doing the quality work that you have been doing. So I'm going to have you back. This is your second time. You're the first person to be on twice. So I'm serious about this. I want people to come in, tell their story, and then over time be able to unpack their lives even more. So once again, welcome you all. Thank you for coming to visit with us today. For Dr. Ray coming to hear his story about his book and about his life. Thank you for coming to the Robaer Report, where we look at an individual and or a group and their contribution to society and society's development. Um, Once again, we'll be on next Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For those who are watching in the future, this broadcast, Dr. Ray, his book, we put it on the StreamYard a few times. Let's put it up again as we close out. The title of the book, once again, An Introduction to America's Rigged Democratic System and Systemic Racism, African Americans' Extraordinary Perseverance and Phenomenal Resiliency. That book can be found at store.bookbaby.com for $20. You can also get an ebook, all right, as well. There is the Facebook group of Empathic Solutions Group. You can always like that Facebook page, follow what's going on. Dr. Ray, is there anything you want to say to the audience before we close out for this evening?
It was just my pleasure being on once again on a award-winning show, and I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ray, and have a good day, you all. And until next time, we will see you all. Peace, and have a great day.